I've worked in English language teaching for over 3 years now, and this is basically my Netflix documentary on myths about English language teaching, things that I've heard at the beginning of my career or that I still keep on hearing and seeing, which it's not exactly how things actually are. So let's debunk some myths. Number one is you should pre-teach vocabulary when we're dealing with reading or listening comprehension. This is painful because we all go through the cycle. You do CELTA, you do TEFL, it's one of the things that they tell you, and you apply it painstakingly. So usually, okay, maximum 5 words, usually 2, 3. These will help the student, blah, blah, blah. Then you do Delta and they tell you, well, actually not really, and maybe you shouldn't do it. And with good reason once you think about it. So one very important skill that we should teach our students is the ability to understand from context. It's a great skill to have and a very important one. So instead of giving those words to the students before the activity, we should at least give them a chance to understand them from context. This doesn't mean that you should never do it. Sometimes there's one word that's important to understand something and you don't want to deal with it at a later stage. You want to do it, great. It's never black and white. In most cases, it's gray. So, number 2 is that translation is bad. Now, should you try and talk in English as much as you can during your English language classroom? Yes. But is it okay if from time to time you use a translation because it might save you 3 minutes of trying to explain the word to a student? Also yes. And in certain cases, especially if the structure is the same in your student's L1, just do it. It's so much easier. Sometimes languages behave exactly the same. And it's worth telling your students because it's just going to make things so much easier for them instead of having to do everything in English. And when it comes to abstract concepts, sometimes it's just easier to give the translation in the language. This is if you speak the L1, obviously. So no, translation is not your enemy. Having said this, if you just start giving instructions and everything else in the L1, then it becomes a whole other thing, and that's obviously not okay, but that's another matter. Another one is that if you've taught something during your hour and a half, 2 hours of lessons, and by the end of the lesson, students are still making mistakes, it's a fail. Now, I've got very sad news for you. It takes much longer than that for students to actually learn something properly. Do you have any idea how many times students need to see the same word in different contexts before that word actually becomes part of their vocabulary? I think it's like more than 7. And 7, I think I'm being generous. It will take more than a lesson. We need repetition, revision, recycling in order to actually assimilate new notions. So it's not the end of the world. Okay, we're at number 4, that accuracy is more important than fluency. Now this depends on the context. If you're teaching IELTS, accuracy is extremely important because they will have a writing, a speaking, they will be marked on that. But if you're teaching English as a second language and you have students who need to live in the new country, which is English speaking, fluency is much more important than accuracy. I'd rather talk to someone who makes mistakes here and there, but with whom I can have an actual conversation rather than someone who speaks like a robot and has very long and unnatural pauses every time because they're thinking about the correct grammar. And look, it's also a matter of confidence. The more students are able to talk, the more confident they will feel and the more they will improve. But again, it really depends on your context. And I also think it's very unrealistic to expect our students to not make mistakes. Obviously, we want to teach appropriate and correct language, but mistakes are part of the learning process, and an S missed for the third person here and there if then for the rest I can understand everything, it's so not the end of the world. And talking about this, as someone who is not a native speaker, I feel this deeply. Slogan of this series is there's no black and white, it's all grey. So I'm not going to say that native speakers are worse than non-native speakers, and I'm not going to say it's the other way around either. I'm just going to say that I've met some native speaker teachers who had no idea about the language because they just spoke it. So they had no idea how to teach grammar. They had to go and check literally everything, and they would make mistakes. There was this teacher once who said, "Can you pass me the scissor?" I was like, "The scissor?" "Yeah, like one." It's like, "No, it's scissors." And he was convinced. I was like, because I'm a native speaker, I'm like, that's not how it works. But then I also met non-native teachers who would say stuff like chocolate. Like, that's basic pronunciation. It's part of your job to know how to pronounce at least like basic and common words correctly. And sometimes I make mistakes as well, but as non-native speakers, we have the advantage from an emotional and empathetic point of view, I guess, of being aware of the experience of learning English and the challenges that come with it. We had to learn the language, we had to learn the rules, the grammar, and all those things. So there's no better or worse, really, but the fact that even now you see so many jobs advertised for native speakers, in the industry, that's considered discrimination. That shouldn't be a thing. Unfortunately, it still is. It's the client's fault requesting for a native speaker because they think that would make a better teacher, but it's not really. It's how well you know the language, as in how well can you teach it. Talking about empathy and relationships, not everyone thinks the same way I do about it, but I do think that relationships are really important. I think it's important to establish good rapport with your students. I know some teachers who don't care about it that much, like I'm just a teacher, I'm there to teach, like whether they like me or not, it's not important. I think it is. In my experience, it is, because the more a student likes you and respects you and trusts you, the better the learning. Like, there's so much psychology that goes on into teaching. So I think that establishing a good rapport is really important and can make a huge difference. It's very different when you first start teaching a class and when you've had it for like a few weeks or a month. But again, this could be me. I just think, again, for me, psychology, very, very important. And I'll always get to know my students, their goals, their aspirations, their dreams, anything that I can help them with. And I also think it's important for students to become independent. And this is not talked about that much. You're the teacher, it's your responsibility, but I think part of what we do is to make sure that students are able to learn on their own. After a while, I should have put you in such a good position where you need me less and less, and one day you'll be like, okay, maybe I don't need English classes anymore, which, especially if you work as a freelance, obviously we also want money, but at the same time, it's part of our job. Like, we want them to get better. So here are all the resources, everything extra that you can do when you're not in class with me, and here's all the ways that I can help you to get there as soon as possible. Okay, and we're getting to materials. We have the course book. Unless you're freelance, then you might have other materials. The problem though with course books, which we love so much because they make our life easier, is the fact that materials are not authentic usually, which is a very big problem. It's the reason why students don't know how to listen or can't listen or don't know how to read. It's not how language actually lives in the real world. So it takes me a bit of extra time, but no matter the level, I always try and find materials that are found out in the real world to use in class with students. Because especially when we first start teaching, we tend to look at the course book as the Bible. It's not. The course book is there to make life easier, especially for inexperienced teachers, but it's not perfect. And you should use it with this idea in mind. I'm going to pick and choose things that are convenient and helpful for me, but it doesn't mean that I need to use everything that's in there, and it doesn't mean that everything that's in there is perfect or the best solution possible. We're talking about pronunciation. Some students want to talk like the Queen, other ones watch a bit too much TV from the States, and I've had students talking like gangsters, which is really funny. That's their choice. It's their preference. This is something that I think you should kind of disclose with students. When I first get a new class, I tell them like, hey guys, I'm from Italy, but this is the way I speak, which would tend more towards British English type of English. And this is the pronunciation that I will teach you, British English, because it's the one I'm familiar with. When it differs, I will also give you the American version, but you don't need to talk like me. If you like the American accent and you're more comfortable with the American accent, you can talk with the American accent, and that's totally fine. There's not one correct English. It's not just that, like I'm in Barbados right now. The official language is English. Do you have any idea how different it is from the English from the UK? And it's not less correct than that. And I think that students need to realize that they have this choice. And also to make language learning less Eurocentric, like that's a very old vision of things. The world is so big and there's so many different ways of speaking a language. As long as it's not plain wrong, choose the one you like. I can't say something in 10 different accents, obviously. But yeah, I can't impose my accent on you. I can't impose an accent full stop. It's okay to speak English really well. And for me at the same time to tell that you're from Spain. No one's telling you to get rid of that. Because maybe you don't care, or maybe you are proud of being Spanish and you're okay with people hearing that when you talk. That's on the person. Which brings me to number 10. Which is pronunciation and correct English. In general, I would say when we teach pronunciation, it's not about, again, speaking like the queen, the king, but it's in most cases an approximation. Like your English needs to be good enough for me to understand you. So we talk about comfortable intelligibility. And that's all there is to it. Like that's why we should teach pronunciation really, unless, again, not black and white. There's a specific reason why you need to sound a certain way. It could be that you have a very high stakes job and they require you to speak almost like a native. It is what it is, you work on that. But in general, that's not the goal. Okay, well that was it. Thank you so much for coming to my TED Talk. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, I guess. Talk to you soon, bye.